This is Chapter 10E, Interaction Effects. So we already learned there are two types of effects, main effects, and we talked about this in the last lecture, so I won't talk about those right here. But we also have interaction effects, and that's the effect of one factor that may differ according to the conditions of the other factor. So an example is a medical study might find that a medication is more effective for males than for females. That's a simple example of an interaction effect. That would indicate, if that happened, that there was an interaction between medication and gender. So how do we detect interaction effects in bar graphs? So instead of observing whether one color or one cluster is larger than another cluster or color, we look for patterns inside clusters. So observing the pattern within bar pens, we're going to look for whether patterns differ between or among the clusters. So is there a difference between two bars? Like is the difference between two bars much greater in one pair than the other pair? We can see here the orange is a lot taller than the blue in the pair on the left, and the orange is not so distinctly different from the blue in the pair on the right. So we're not comparing these we're not comparing the height of the bars within the pairs. This shows a main effect. What we're really looking at is whether the pattern is different. So another example is the orange higher in one pair and the blue higher in the other pair. That's what we have going on here. And that also suggests that an interaction is present. This is an opposite pattern. Or is the pattern within each bar cluster similar to the pattern in other clusters? And that would mean no interaction is present. And here we can see that in each cluster, even though each pair is a little bit, the pair on the right is a little bit taller than the pair in the middle, is a little bit taller than the pair on the left, within each pair, we can see that the relationship between the orange and the blue bar is similar. Orange is, approximately equally higher than blue in each pair cluster, and that means no interaction is present. So that's the kind of thing we're looking for in bar graphs. So how do we detect interaction effects in line plots? So we're really looking for the similarity of the lines and of the angles of the lines. So are the lines angled differently? Then an interaction is present. So here you can see, even though the difference is subtle, this top line is really a little bit different angle than the bottom line, and interaction may be present. Or in this example, really the angle difference is quite distinctive. There's definitely an interaction present here. We can also look to see if the lines are crossed, and if so, there's definitely an interaction. Like in this example, we can see that the effect is completely different depending on what level individuals are in. And we can look to see if the lines are close to parallel. And if they are, then there's no interaction present. And we have a couple of obvious examples here with these two lines close to parallel. And in the lower example, again, they're angled, but they're parallel. And that means there's not an interaction. So how do we observe interaction effects in a line plot? And you can see I've written some of the details of the study we're looking at here, same one from the previous slides. So main effects we talked about last time. We could see that there was a main effect of caffeine, that the orange line was higher than the blue line, and that the cluster or pair of points related to high screen use was higher than the pair of points related to low screen use. And you might have to track this horizontal line across to be able to detect that with your eye. So the interaction effect is that the different angles of the line. So the fact that the angle of the orange line is less pronounced than the angle of the blue line suggests that caffeine use differs according to screen usage. So we would interpret the main effects as saying that sleep time disrupts sleep regardless of whether caffeine is used, and caffeine disrupts sleep regardless of whether screens are used. Both main effects. But the interaction effect we would just interpret by saying the effect of caffeine on sleep disruption is greater in the low screen use condition than in the high screen use condition. There's a greater gap between the points in the low screen use condition. So let's look at another example. How do exercise and meditation affect memory recall? So we have two factors. So factor one, we have 10 minutes of exercise, just a straight up yes or no, it's either present or absent. Factor two, we have 10 minutes of meditation, yes or no, and our dependent variable is memory. So we find in our data that we have a main effect of meditation, and we can look at this in a bar graph. And in this case, orienting to the graph, we can see that the colors of the bars represent the meditation factor, and the clusters of bars represent the exercise factor. And so we can see here that we have a main effect of meditation because in both clusters, the blue bar is taller than the orange bar. We can see that in the left, blue is taller than orange, and the same is true in the right. However, there is no main effect for exercise. We would need, if we had a main effect for exercise, we would need both the blue and orange bar in this left-hand exercise condition to be higher than both the blue and orange bar in the no exercise condition. This isn't the case, and so we don't have a main effect for exercise here. We can also examine this in a line plot. So here, orienting to it once again, the color of the lines is representing the meditation factor, and the cluster of points are representing the exercise factor. And we can see, because the orange line is higher than the blue line, that we do have a main effect for meditation. But we can also see that since both of the points over here in the exercise condition aren't higher than the ones on the left here in the no exercise condition, we don't have a main effect there. This orange, upper orange point with the 12 in it in the no exercise condition is higher than this lower blue point in the exercise condition with only a 10. We would need both of these on the right to be taller than both of these on the left to detect a main effect. And so we would just interpret this by saying that meditation impacts memory regardless of exercise condition, but that exercise does not independently impact memory in this example. So in this example, we're looking at accuracy, and we took a look at this problem in main effects. So we were just looking at noise level and task difficulty on problem-solving accuracy. So when we look at the bar graph, we can see that there was a main effect for task difficulty. That is, the cluster associated with easy is higher than all the bars associated with difficult. But we also have an interaction effect. Noise appeared to have an impact in the difficult condition. We can see here these bars are all different heights according to the noise level, but not in the easy condition. The bars are about the same height. And in the line plot, we see something similar. We can see that task difficulty, the blue line is above the orange line, but we can also see the interaction effect. The lines are not parallel. The points are circled here, and they needn't be, but we can see that this noise condition has a different impact, the difficult condition, but not in the easy condition. So here's another example from the lecture on main effects. We have social media exposure by personality type on self-esteem. So in the bar graph, we can see that there was a main effect for social media usage. The blue bar is consistently higher than the orange bar. But we also have an interaction effect, and we can see that because, well, first off, we have the blue bar actually lower in the introvert than in the extrovert condition, but the orange bar is higher in introvert than extrovert. But we can mostly just look at these patterns within the pairs, and we could see that there's a much greater, more pronounced effect in the extrovert condition than in the introvert condition. We can look at the same thing in the line plot. It's maybe even easier. Well, they're both pretty easy to detect. We still see that main effect for social media usage. The blue is above the orange, but this interaction effect is revealed because the lines are at different angles. So exposure to social media seems to impact introverts and extroverts differently. So what effects are present in this example? See if you can figure it out before continuing in the slideshow. But the answers are here. So we have this main effect for level that we already looked at in the last lecture. The left bar pair is higher than the right bar pair. But we also have an interaction effect. We can see the bars in level 1 are identical, but in level 2, the orange bar is higher than the blue bar. And it's not the height of these two bar pairs that's really determining the interaction. It's the difference in the pattern. So the fact that the pattern in level 1 is identical and the pattern in level 2 is non-identical. That's what's telling us about the interaction. What effects are present here? Well, we can see that we have the main effect for condition in the sense that the orange is higher than the blue in every level. But we also find that we have no interaction effect, and that's because the relationship between the orange bar and the blue bar is similar across levels. Admittedly, level 3 bars are higher than level 2 and level 1, but the fact that the pattern is the same is what tells us that no interaction is present. If the pattern were different, this might be an interaction. What effects are present? Well, in this example, we can see no main effects. The point pairs, like the ones in level 2, aren't higher than the ones in level 1. And the bar colors, we can't see that the blue line is higher than the orange line. But we do see a strong interaction effect. The lines vary in opposite directions and cross near the center, and this is a really strong indicator of an interaction. We can see that, you know, in level 1, condition 2 is higher than condition 1, and the opposite effect is true in level 2. And finally, what effects are present? Well, here we can see that we have this main effect for condition with the orange line higher consistently than the blue line, but there's no main effect for level. None of the point clusters are greater than the next, but we also see that there is no interaction. The lines are parallel, and this is a strong indicator that there is not an interaction going on. So in summary, reviewing what we learned in this entire couple lectures, main effects suggest that one factor impacts the DV regardless of the conditions in the other factors. We can detect main effects in the line graph by asking if one line is consistently higher than the other line, or if the points for one level are consistently higher than points for other levels. And in a bar graph, we detect main effects by asking if one bar color is higher than the other bar color, or if one bar cluster is consistently higher than the other bar clusters. But interaction effects, which suggest that the impact of one factor on the DV depends on the other factor. Well, here we look in a line graph for lines that angle differently or cross, and these situations suggest an interaction. And in a bar graph, the bar clusters show different patterns suggest an interaction. And the reverse is true. If the lines are parallel, there's no interaction, and if the bar clusters have the same pattern, then there's no interaction.